But yeah, it was a crazy time. It was a lot, and nobody really knew where it was going to go. We're going to be taking a look at the very first GSL Season 1 final. This is a happy memory for me. Also a kind of a big deal in esports history here. I'm going to have the intro to this muted. Took me a while to actually dig this up. It's not easy to find a lot of this older stuff. So, this was a huge deal. We're actually going to go into this so fast. This was a huge deal for StarCraft 2. The first real, like, Star League. A lot of production money was put into this, GOM TV. A lot of pressure, Blizzard watching. And we had Fruit Dealer, a.k.a. Cool, versus Hope Torture, who's also known as Into the Rainbow. So real quick here. Fruit Dealer was a fairly solid Brood War player, but obviously the underdog when compared to Rainbow, also known as Into the Rainbow. So Fruit Dealer, under the ID, also Cool, under FOU, a very, very famous team. He was the only Zerg to get this far. Keep in mind, any new RTS, there's going to be a lot of problems you encounter. Balance issues, meta issues. People don't really know what they're doing. There's a lot of feeling through the dark. And he was up against Rainbow. Now, this guy was known as Into the Rainbow. There was also Into the Rain, who became a caster. He's actually about my age, 1984. This guy was a legendary Protoss player in the very, very early days of StarCraft 1. An incredible player, retired early, came back, and was basically the favorite going into this. You can see the production level is insane. A lot of thought put into this. They really wanted to try to capture the hype, the vibe. By the way, best of 5 here. This is game 5. I'm not going to go right into game 1. That would be a very long video, but this is the final game between these two.
Left side of the map is the Fruit Dealer.
Oh my God, here's me with my cancer voice. This is back before I had real voice control. So I was just blowing my vocals out, casting all over the place. I eventually had to take voice lessons here. So I'm going to keep this pretty low here. And you can see on the map, this is back when they had a very different idea of what maps were. This is 2010, chat. And this was when they experimented with maps that had very close mains. There were islands were more of a thing back then. And this was a really exciting moment for Artosis and me. Just emotionally, we had been in Korea forever, kind of waiting for StarCraft 2 to come out. GSL had been a huge success. I think even him and I were surprised that it had become this much of a global phenomenon, StarCraft 2. This many people were hype about it. We were starting to have foreigners show up in Korea even before GSL started, just for the qualifiers. All these foreigners popping up. And foreigners in the audience as well. So this was a very kind of crazy, cool, exciting moment. I actually remember playing a show match against my brother, I think, on this map as well. All the maps are very different now, by the way. Whenever you go back to an old RTS game, you're going to find that we don't know how big the map should be, how small they should be. And so you have a lot of, I think, cool ideas at play. We have to see who exactly, what has the best idea for maps, what is fair. So it's a little bit of a trial by fire. You know, we did some earlier videos. It was Fisheye versus Gogo. You could see just how awful early Brood War maps were in certain matchups. Like, Fisheye really didn't stand a chance just on the nature of the way that map was laid out with no gas there at the natural, so you couldn't actually tech into anything useful in a long game. So in this game, we've got a Proxy Reaper. A lot on the line here. As whoever's going to win this is actually going to take the entire tournament. Unless I'm mistaken, this was back when we did best of 5s. I don't think we were doing best of 7s yet in StarCraft 2. I do think there's an argument to be made for best of 5s in general being better for the audience and generally makes for closer matches. Statistically, if you have a best of 7, you almost never get a 4-3. It's really rare. You get more games, but it seems like with a best of 5, is it 3-1? Okay, so then this was when they started best of 5. Yeah, you're right at the top. Excuse me, it says 3-1. So there was a debate early on in StarCraft 2. The point I'm trying to make is people were, thinking, okay, is more better? Is less more? StarCraft 1 historically went for five games maximum, where StarCraft 2, they started to do 7. So even back then, they had a lot of really interesting ideas with placement. Like we see the Rax is set up here to try to get that block. Already action-packed game here, too. The Ling's kind of racing around here trying to intercept the Reaper. And we see, actually, in this game, already not a fast expanding Terran. Super aggro, super cheesy game here. Is this the last game? Am I remembering this right? Well, we'll see. Maybe there actually does go into a further game, but we'll go through this game anyways. This was a fun map to kind of see, what players were going to do. Was it going to be one where they were going to be prone to do drops right away, or were they going to try to just play conservatively and expand? There were just a couple maps that were released right at the start of the game. You can see now that they didn't stick with these ideas at all, but at the time, that was kind of a cool idea to have you both adjacent and accessible to each other by air. Able to still expand and be far away on some level. You can see in the middle of the map, if you're able to dig through the center of the map, you can get to each other and get quick access right away. So one thing that I think a lot of people forget about the early days of StarCraft was there was like a battle going on between Blizzard and Kespa. Things had not been ameliorated by those two parties yet. And so, oh, you can't see the minimap very well. Damn it. Thank you, Gemini. I actually did this last time. I will fix this right now. By the way, my voice sounds awful in this. This is back when I didn't have vocal control. I'll get this fixed. Just give me 1 second. Is this it? No. See, is this it? No, that's the Twitch chat. So yeah, Blizzard had not, at the time, been on good terms with Kespa. So Kespa wasn't actually letting, here we go. Kespa wasn't actually letting their players play. So you had either new players who were a lot younger who were competing. I'll put this over here, actually. Or you had very old school retired players who were not under the Kespa umbrella. As far as quality goes, guys, we can try to go up to 720. Can we actually pull it off? Oh, it's much better. I'm sorry. We were doing some Brood War casts here. And so, yeah, my cam's back. Sorry, I was trying to fix that overlay. And so I was kind of used to the older, crappier graphics. So these were like basically two of the best of the best. It was a couple seasons later we got to unlock a lot of the Kespa players. When Blizzard and Kespa were finally able to get onto some good terms. But that had huge negative impacts on Korean viewership, how excited Koreans were to compare this league to the, the old MSL, the OSL, some of the small televised events that were going on, before even that. So we got lucky because this turned out to actually be really exciting finals. So you can see on this map in the top right, you actually get an island base. We don't really see as many island bases or shared bases as much like that with island bases anymore. But this was a lot of the fun stuff they were experimenting with to see what could or could not be done here. Chad asked, Tasus, what do you reckon if Blizzard added 3-spot or 4-spot 1v1 maps in Brood War spawns? Instead of knowing where your opponent pops, you need to scout. That would be cool. There's a couple different reasons why they did not want to have as many 4-player maps. I think a lot of players tended to complain about issues with openings. I think it also became a problem when... especially when we started to introduce a lot more workers into the game. I think 2-player maps were a little bit better suited. I hope that with Stormgate, we don't just completely copy StarCraft 2 maps, that we actually have a lot of experimental maps early on to see what's good and what's not good. It's easy to forget that in both StarCraft 1 and 2, they did a lot of experimentation with islands and seeing what would make for an interesting game or a fast game or a slow game. And I think, you know, you have to have that to kind of weed out what's viable and what's not viable. And no matter what you do in an RTS, you're not always going to have a balanced map right out of the gate because we just don't understand how the game's going to work. Your thoughts on Zero Space maps? They look like Legacy of the Void maps. I think right now there's a lot of immediate emulation of StarCraft 2 modern maps, which is, I mean, it's fine. I hope that they look at a lot of different maps and different ideas because you never know. You could end up with an RTS game where you have to have islands. Maybe that's what makes it actually good. So you could see immediately Fruit Dealer's able to spot this island base. Kind of a crazy moment. I think the best game out of all these that they had was maybe the Baneling bust that happened. But in this game, we're really seeing Hope Torture kind of deal with the ramifications of trying to be aggressive early on and then seeing the Zerg kind of get out of control and grow around the map. I remember talking to Artosis in the early days before StarCraft 2 was out, and there was just this kind of debate around unlimited unit selection, and I was really worried that mutas were going to be too strong, because in Brood War, a control group of mutas with another unit grouped in, like a Larva or an Overlord, there's a trick where you can allow them to bunch together. If you trap something on one side of the map and put it in a control group with a bunch of air units, and then send those air units to the other side of the map, it stacks them really tightly. And when microed correctly, it's really powerful. It's hard to like hit stray units. Unless you can target click on the mutas, it's likely that all the damage is going to get distributed evenly, so none of the mutas are going to get hit. So it's almost like a shared HP in a lot of ways. And I was afraid that you would end up with these muted death balls that would just be too strong. And I guess we kind of have them. It wasn't as overpowered as I thought it would be. That was a lot of me just kind of imprinting experiences from StarCraft 1 into StarCraft 2. Weirdly, I was actually one of the people that was against multiple building selection and unlimited unit selection. I thought that's what made StarCraft 1 really good. I think it turned out to be fine in StarCraft 2. Even when I was playing the first couple days, I was kind of like, oh, all right, this is fine. What do you mean by voice control? Listen to my voice here.
Annoy.
That's me.
Hope Torture. The command center's on the way down here. He's going to expand again. This could be a timing.
So if you look at what was going on for me back then, there was a lot of casting. I didn't have like proper voice coaching. I just sounded different. So I was blowing my voice out all the time. But then I would get another gig. I couldn't stop working, right? Like suddenly I'd hit this boom. I was making money. And so I was wrecking my vocal cords and just continuing to cast through it. Eventually, with vocal coaching, I did learn how to change it. That's why I sound different now. If you look at my old stuff, I either sound really nasally or really hoarse. And Reddit was fairly convinced it was because I had there were videos where I had smoked cigarettes. I don't smoke anymore, by the way. I think I've been off nicotine for like 8 years. Hold on, we got to drop here. Banelings versus Thors, man. SCV's running to repair him. Baneling's blowing him up. So yeah, that's why my voice sounded blown out, because it was. And I sounded like that off and on for a couple years. I feel like the only times I ever really got to let my voice recover was when I would just have like a month off. So eventually we were able to eventually I was able to get it under control. Now I can cast all the time and my voice basically stays in shape. It comes down to projecting from your diaphragm. There's basically a muscle right below the little V separation in your rib cage where your solar plexus is, that if you flex on that, you'll project your voice without having to yell.
Looking to see if he can do anything over here.
I gotta turn myself down. I'm cringing too hard hearing my old voice here. This is R-rated, everyone. So we've got these Baneling drops coming here. What's funny is, like, this is probably not the great composition to have against mech. Even back then, people were trying to experiment. Is mech better than not having mech? What's the way to do it? But this is a game where, yeah, the Zerg has just gotten to the point where they're so big. And, you know, you can hit everywhere, drop everywhere, and the Terran really can't win in the game of catch-up. With the mutas hitting the island, with the drops over here at the bottom, it's rough. Wiggs says, you guys were casting everywhere near the start. It was crazy. Yeah, it was insane, man. We kind of went from 0 to 100. And so we were in a period where we were barely getting by. I was occasionally like doing blogs for like $30 and getting paid on Western Union. You know, any voice acting gig I'd pick up in Korea. Sometimes I would, you know, get one tournament in Korea where Dan and me would do a couple games that would fund my living for like 2 or 3 months. Eating out of 7-Eleven. Honestly, in debt to a lot of my friends, borrowing money from them, which I was able to pay off a year or two after getting into GSL. But yeah, it was a crazy time. It was a lot, and nobody really knew where it was going to go. At the time, we didn't even know there was going to be more than one esport. It was a big surprise when League of Legends rose up along with these other games. And so it's a painful kind of slow death here from Into the Rainbow. And keep in mind, no Zergs made it to the round of 8. So this was like a crazy moment where people kind of thought Zerg was the worst race, but then this guy managed to come up and with a lot of really good play, play a pretty incredible series.
Nobody else can win with. Yeah, right now, and he's doing it. He's got.
And so, if I remember right, this is, you know, basically for the rest of this game going to be Hope Torture, kind of getting smashed everywhere he goes, unable to recover. But it is also kind of cool to see that, like, back then they basically had the right idea with the unit compositions. Obviously, the game has changed quite a bit. And one of the cool things for me is, like, a lot of the people that were really young, like in high school or middle school, that watch this, I now know live in Korea, grew up on GSL, now either visit or live out here, which is very touching for me. And there it is. So that's going to be GG. I'm just going to lower this a little bit just because there might be music that plays here. And, yeah, I just don't want to get DMC or copyright struck or whatever. So this was a great story. Not every esports match is as good of a story. You always try to tell a good story no matter what. But this guy, fruit dealer, he was literally selling fruit in Korea. If you've been to Seoul before or anywhere in Korea, you'll see occasionally somebody selling like bananas or tomatoes out of like a truck or on the side of the street. If I remember right, his grandmother was very sick, and so he was to make money on the side selling, you know, fruit and vegetables. Played StarCraft 2. Managed to qualify for GSL. Was an excellent StarCraft 1 player as well. As were all these guys that were qualified early on. You either StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2 or really good at another RTS if you were going to make any splash at all in the early days of StarCraft 2. So, yeah, I'm sorry, either Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 1 is what I'm trying to say. But, yeah, we had a packed audience. It was really hype. It was very cool to see him win. And this was the beginning, right? We didn't know how long GSL was going to go for, how long StarCraft 2 was going to go for. If you had asked me back then what would be going on in 2024, I would have thought we would have been in the middle of StarCraft 3. But surprisingly, we've still managed to keep this tournament going. GSL is now the longest lasting esports league or tournament of all time. It's actually lasted longer than OSL and MSL, which is crazy. By the way, these commentators, all my buddies back then, you can see on the right, I don't know if we're going to get a shot of it, but on the right is Mr. Che, who is now works at esports at Africa TV. So totally different caster lineup. This is before Caster Park was back there. And so, yeah, I mean, this was a great moment to kind of crown a champion. It had been my dream to do a Star League or cast some kind of a league that I had grown up watching. And, you know, we did it, and it's gone on to this very day. I don't know what else. You know, there's not a whole lot else to say here other than that it was a crazy upset. It was you know, a lot of people thought Hope Torture was just going to take it. He was considered a very cool, calculated player, especially these guys that were from the early days of Brood War. That's like a whole skill set in of itself to kind of know how to pick up an RTS before people really knew how to play RTSs. So those guys are kind of legendary in their own right. But yeah, Hope Torture didn't make it, and Terran didn't win. People were pretty confident either Terran or Protoss was the strongest, that Zerg, there was no way they could do it. And Hope Torture ducked out pretty quickly in competitive StarCraft right after that. It'll be interesting to see when Stormgate comes around and these other RTS games like Zero Space, if they're able to make a big impact in Korea, you know, who's going to show up, who's not, and then who's actually going to be able to take it. One of the big debates early on in StarCraft 2, before there was a GSL, was who's actually going to be better. Will it be StarCraft Brood War players? Will it be Warcraft 3? Will it be neither? Will we get a mix of 50-50? It turns out it was almost entirely Brood War very quickly. There were some Warcraft 3 players that were very good. Obviously, you had Moon that played in the early GSLs. You had Grubby, who was an excellent player and played for several years, also did casting. So it was fun. It was really fun. It was so cool to be learning a new RTS. Everything was so fresh. I loved, you know, watching what players did and then scrambling to get home to play. Todd as well. Thank you, Yasha, of course. Yeah, Genesis, we'll be doing a story about my very, very first cast ever in probably another video. Yes, I do remember Moon's Burrowed Banelings. That was very cool. I know what you're talking about, Dirty Little Potato. Very Warcraft 3-esque move there from him. But I think, you know, not to take anything away from the Warcraft 3 guys, StarCraft 2 was a lot more like StarCraft 1 than, you know, than like Warcraft 3. So it seemed like it was a pretty easy game to step into. So, yeah, very cool to kind of look back on that game. Let me know if you like this kind of content. I really enjoy going back and watching this. This was a really memorable day for me. It was fun to cast. It's also funny how bad my voice was back then. If you're ever going to cast and do the kind of work that I do, you need to know vocal control. It's actually very dangerous to cast like that. You can actually blow your voice out, and it takes a long time to recover. Anyways, let me know if you want to see more content like this. Please like and subscribe in the video. I hope to see you in a future video. Oh, and go to tastelessthreads.com. That's my merch site where you can get this 1A, 2A, 3A shirt along with a bunch of other cool stuff I'm sure you'll enjoy. Have a good one.